So Justin founded the Home Library Effect, which is an initiative to someday develop home libraries for every child in America, which has grown from 25 students to 2,500. Shout out!
Shout out.
Justin is a 2011 National Board Certified Teacher, the 2007 Arkansas Teacher of the Year. In addition to those awesome accomplishments, he is also a father to a 7-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son. He teaches at the Springdale School District, and we are thrilled to have him with us today. I kind of want to be him when I grow up. So please help me welcome Mr. Justin Minkel.
How we spend our days is how we spend our lives. Andy Dillard said this. And every one of you in this room could be making a lot more money doing something a lot easier. And you have chosen to teach. And the way we have chosen to spend our days is by filling our students' days with more laughter and more patience and more fun and more meaning. And I can't think of a better way to spend our days and our years and our lives than working toward that goal. It's an honor to be in this profession with every single one of you. The more I'm a dad and the more I'm a teacher, the more I think about this quote too. Responsibility and delight can coexist. Because I think in our schools right now, we're in a time where we've hammered really hard on responsibility. I don't think we have to go further in that direction. We have 6-year-olds who are worried about their math score and what their goal is on their math test. I think it's our job to restore some of that delight that William here felt on our water day. And remember that these are kids and that school should be fun and they should love learning. I'm going to start today with your stories. And I think it's easy for us as teachers, especially I think in high poverty schools, with the pressure that is on test scores, to forget how much we enjoy these little human beings just as people in our class and how hilarious they are. So I want to ask all of you to be thinking about a moment with a student that you had at any point in your career that made you smile or laugh or cry, but in a good way. And while you do that, I'm going to share mine. This is Salvador. He just sees the world a little differently from any kid I've ever known in my entire life. And there was a year when we had a multicultural unit where every different hallway was set up like a different country. We had Mexico and Egypt and Italy, and I asked all the second graders to pretend they were going on an airplane. I'm going to ask you to do that right now, so please stand up for just a minute. And if my second graders have to do magic fingers like Kazam, I'll turn your chair into a seat on an airplane, Kazam, and when you sit back down, you'll be on a plane. This is what I had them do. Can you sit down again? Buckle your seatbelts, please. Fasten the seatbelts. You can recline your seat in a minute. So I asked them to pretend we were going to take off, and then we got up to 30,000 feet. And I said, look out the window. So I do that now. Look out the window. Look at the rivers and mountains down below. You can sip your drink, and rip open your little bag of peanuts. So the kids did that. They did what you just did, right? They were doing it, and second graders, no problem. We're on a plane. Great. Anything to get out of school for just a minute, and be in another kind of imaginary realm. So they reclined their seats, and they sipped their drinks, and they looked down at the mountains and rivers. But when I asked them to open their peanuts, Salvador's skinny arm shot up in the air, and he said, deadly serious, but Mr. Minkel, we don't have any peanuts. I just looked at him and was like, Salvador, we don't have an airplane either. And I love that moment because it captured something about the age that I teach. That on one hand, they'll imagine anything. On the other hand, they're really into the real sensory world. And they like watching ants. They like digging up mud, crashing into each other at recess. So that's my story. I want you to think for about 10 seconds of that moment for you. And when I say go, we'll do think fair share, just like we do with our students. You'll talk, I'll say 10 seconds, then 3, 2, 1, and I'll kind of glower at whoever's still talking, and then we'll come back together. So share that moment, please, with the people sitting next to you. Go. Thank you all for doing that. And I think we need to hold on to those moments, not just to remember what our kids need, but what we need. We have to restore that delight for ourselves in their fun. A few years ago, I was in the hallway giving all the kids fist bumps when they came to second grade, and there was this beautiful little girl who wandered down looking really scared and lonely. And I found out later she was a kindergartner who was new to our school and she got lost. And she went left instead of straight. She ended up down second grade. And she looked scared, and she looked confused, and then she saw me and she smiled. And she just kind of took a breath, and she came up and she wrapped her arms around me and gave me a hug. And I was thinking about that moment later that night, and I thought, she didn't know anything about me. I'm 3 times as tall as her. But in her mind, I was a teacher. And a teacher is someone that you trust to take care of you when you're lost, when you're lonely, when you're afraid. And our students give us that gift of their trust. And it's easier with little kids, I think, than older kids, but they still continue to give us that gift of their trust, that we will act in their best interest. That trust is a gift. And I think it's our job to earn it. What worries me is that I think sometimes we fail to earn their trust as a society, not teachers, but adults in general, because we forget this really simple, important truth about school, which is school is for them. School is for kids. It's not for legislators. It's not for superintendents. It's not for teachers. And all those people are partners. They care about kids. They try to do right by them. But it's not for them. School is for the kids. And they're the ones who spend more time with us during the day for elementary teachers than they spend with their families, or their own parents during the day. And we have to shape school to their dreams and what they're excited about. I think we spend a lot of time trying to shape kids to fit school, beginning in kindergarten. And we need to fit them. We need to shape school to fit kids, their interests, their dreams, what they're excited about learning, how they learn best. I asked all of you in that survey, which got a tremendous response. I read every one and learned a lot just from reading those. What's the best part of our job? What do you think everybody said? Yeah, like I put it into a Wordle, this is what came out. That's how much that was the focus. All of these great words like seeing, learning, watching. I love this line by Neil Postman, that children are the living messages we send to a future that we will not see, to a time we will not see. And I've come to believe that when you strip away all the extra stuff, our job is this, to help children live the lives they dream. We rewrote our school mission statement last year to have this as the very first line. And I think we've gotten confused as a society ever since No Child Left Behind, which was a long time ago, and it's still kind of buried in the system. And we've started to think that this is the purpose of school. Having kids fill in little bubbles with pencils, which they will never do as well as even a really simple computer program. That's not the purpose of school. This can be a means to an end of helping kids live the lives they dream, right, if we use the data right. But I think school's not really about this. It's about them. It's about what kind of life will they lead, what kind of person will they be. And I think we really started to think that this is the end goal when it's the means to the end. And it's the shadow of learning. It's not learning itself. I love this book, The Little Prince. Can you raise your hand if you've read this? So I was rereading this, and I love it because we spend so much time trying to make kids be little adults. And this book kind of flips that. It says there are a lot of things that kids do amazingly that we could learn from as adults. Here's what it says. Grown-ups love numbers. When you tell them you have made a new friend, they never ask you any questions about essential matters. They never say to you, what does his voice sound like? What games does he love best? Does he collect butterflies? Instead, they demand, how old is he? How many brothers does he have? How much does he weigh? How much money does his father make? Only from these numbers do they think they have learned anything about your friend. This is Anna. I talked about her in the last session. She has 4 little sisters. She's one of 5 girls. She lives in poverty. She's an English learner. She made amazing growth in my class in 2nd and 3rd grade. And I got this email from Anna. I'm going to read it to you. I want you to think, should I be happy about this email or disturbed by this email? Hi, Mr. Minkel. I wanted to ask you a question, and that question is, how did you start the home library project? That is a very good project, and thanks to that project, I am a very good reader. In my math test at the end of 5th grade, my score was 232, and I went above my goal by 11 points. I still remember that in the beginning of 2nd grade, my DRA level was 16, and at the end of 3rd grade, I was in DRA 50. My favorite picture books were the Piggy and Gerald books, and my favorite chapter book was The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. You know now I can even read books like If I Stay by Gail Forman. The DRA level is 70, and the Lexile is 830L. You know I reread the BFG and took the journey with Sophie in the BFG again. Well, bye, and remember, I miss you. I had the same response to this email that I think a lot of you would feel, which is very mixed emotions, because I'm proud of Anna's progress. I love the line about I took the journey with Sophie in the BFG again. And I'm proud of her growth. But what troubles me is that she's so fixed on the numbers, right? She's fixated on the shadows of learning, not the learning itself. And the important thing about If I Stay by Gail Forman is not that the level is 830L. And the important thing about Anna as a reader is not that she's a DRA 70, right? And that's on me, and that's on us. And I think we need to do a better job of making sure that we use data, but we don't always have kids embody that idea that's so important to legislators and superintendents and start thinking that learning is about the numbers, or that they, as children, are about the numbers. I have a friend in New York who heard these two kids talking in middle school, and they said, "I'm a 2, what are you?" "Oh, I'm a 3. Not I got a 2 on one test. I am a 2. That is who I am. You are a 3, so you're better than me, right? We've got to change that. This was a line that came from one of you, I don't know if it was on the survey, and it's my favorite quote of this whole presentation, beyond all the ones I pulled out. They need to see that we care about them as a person of the future and present. And I think we focus so much on the future, we can forget the present sometimes. Now, when I started teaching in New York, Teach for America, back in 2000, my biggest problem, believe it or not, was not my fashion sense. It was not the ghastly tie, or the shoes that don't really match the pants, that don't really match the tie, or the shirt. That wasn't my problem. My problem was I thought teaching was about me. And I'd been prepared for that by movies and by this narrative, that teaching was about my passion, and it was about how brilliant I might be, and what brilliant things I would say. And it took me a while to flip that and realize school was about the kids. It was about what brilliant things they thought and what they said. And I had to start thinking about the day from their perspective. You know, it wasn't what I said, it was how much time did they get to talk instead of listening to me talk? How much did they get to move around during the day as a 4th grader who needs to move instead of sitting in their desk? You know, how much did they get to dream? How much did they get to build? And how many choices did they get to make? You know, we love Starbucks because you go into Starbucks and you say, I would like a triple venti, extra foam, half calf. Like you get like 27 syllables to order a coffee. That's the genius of Starbucks. Kids don't always get that choice in school. And I realized that I didn't have enough fun in their day and they didn't get to move and talk and make enough choices. This year, I resolved to do a couple things differently. And I think all of us, no matter how good we are, can have a little more courage in making sure that our philosophy matches up with what we do every day in the classroom. And this is one of mine. Get rid of most punishments and rewards. And it's because treasure boxes are fun, and we need consequences, right? It's really hard, you know, I had 1st grade this year to not have any consequences. But my daughter started kindergarten last year, and then I realized that when I talked to her about her day, she didn't tell me about what books she was excited about reading. And she didn't tell me about the amazing science project. And I know those things happen, because she had a great teacher and she's in a great school, but that's not what she talked about. What do you think she talked about? The behavior chart. She said, well, today I was on pink, but Maya got to go to purple. And Nicholas got in trouble, he was on red and he had to go to timeout. And then later in computers, I passed a level, so I got a bag of Skittles. And I was like, she is missing everything that matters about school, and it's our fault. It's the systems we've created. She made this at home, this little behavior chart. That's how much she internalized. And then she would put her little Lego girls in timeout. Or if the Lego girl did good, she could move up the thing, right? We think these are just fun little things. Kids love glitter pencils. But they internalize it, and to them it's huge in their world. And having to move your pin down in front of everyone would be like if I called out one of you right now for something and made you get up in front of the whole group and go over here in the corner. I mean, that really it affects them more than I realized. Here's the other thing. When you're a dad, you watch way more Disney movies than you will ever admit to anyone, including other dads, so you know watch them too. And I had on my running mix for a while, my iPod Shuffle, I had Let It Go, which I'm admitting to all of you. It's a great running song. And I was watching this with my son this week, and maybe because we were coming here, I thought about it in a different way. I'm going to ask all of you to sing in your best 4 voices. So I'll sing and then you echo it. We dig up diamonds by the score. 1,000 rubies, sometimes more.
1,000 rubies, sometimes more.
But we don't know what we dig them for.
We don't know what we dig them for.
We dig, 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 dig.
We dig, 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 dig.
I've always loved this. I still want to get up and march around. I used to do it when I was 3 years old. But because I was coming here, it hit me how crazy that is. That these dwarves go down in the mines and they dig up rubies and emeralds all day, every day. And they don't know why. They don't know what they dig them for. And it hit me as a teacher. Do my students really know why they're learning? Or do they think that the purpose of learning is to get a good math score? And the purpose of getting a good math score is to get to go to the pool party that only the kids who got their math score get to go to? So I know that there's a balance, right? We don't have to get rid of all external consequences, but kids can't be kind to other kids because they're afraid of getting in trouble. And they can't work hard to be better readers and writers because they want a glitter pencil, right? They can't dig, 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 and not know why they're working so hard. So I've tried to talk to kids, even 6-year-olds, about what kind of life do you want to have? What kind of reader do you want to be? You know, like what makes you feel happy? And really kind of have it be this internal thing, starting really early. We have a rubric about how hard I worked, and it's tied to how much smarter did I get. And after almost everything we do, they show me 1, 2, 3, 4 fingers. You know, how hard did they work? How much smarter did they get? but trying to make it internal, not about some reward or punishment that I know. Here's the other thing. Make sure the path matches the goal. I teach very poor students. There's a lot of test pressure. This year we had the Principal of the Year. We were profiled as one of 5 schools by the Department of Ed. We got a $100,000 grant. We're 5 in the nation. You know what our grade was on the state report card? It was a D. There's pressure that is put on us. And I feel like sometimes I've done things that I knew were not best for kids because I wanted to get to that end goal of having them be stronger readers and writers, right? And I talked to my high school English teacher about that. And it turns out that Maggie had him to Miltonburg. And I told him, here's what I want for my kids. But sometimes I do things that feel like they're not right. But these kids really need to learn to read and write and do math. They have to learn this. What do you think about that? So raise your hand if you're an English teacher, high school, middle school. So here's what English teachers do, I've noticed. If you ask them a question, they never answer your question. They ask you another question or they quote some obscure passage that's really thoughtful and makes you grapple with it. And that's what my high school English teacher did. He didn't give me an answer, even though he's been a teacher forever. He said, well, you know what Gandhi said once? He said, Gandhi said, if you think you can take path A to get to destination Z, or you can take path B to get to destination Z, you're wrong. Already you're wrong. You're thinking about it the wrong way. Because the path shapes the goal. And by the time you get to Z, it's not going to be the same if you took path A or path B. Because the path shapes the goal, and it shapes you. The path you take will shape who you are by the time you get there. So it made me think about it, and that's something I'm resolved this year, is to do more of this. This is a project where the kids created a parachute for a gummy bear, and they do what scientists do, and engineers do. They have to come up with a design and test it, and modify it, and communicate. More of this, and even though this guy's eyeball has some problems, the kids remember this, because we were learning ratios, and they took this portrait by Diego Rivera, and each of them got a tiny piece, and they had to multiply it times 36, length and width times 6. They worked on whatever media they wanted, and they all came together, and they couldn't believe that they put together this picture of this boy with a yellow hat. That's what my students remember. That's what they email me about in middle school, not the worksheets. Hopefully not their math goal, right? This is what they remember. I am a much better teacher now than I was in 2000. It's been 15 years. I hope to still be teaching 30, 40 years from now. But we are all works in progress. And the reason that I wanted to start, before we talk about teacher leadership, with just teaching, is that I think it's important to realize that we never make it, right? We never just get there. It's not like, now I'm a good enough teacher, now I can worry about other stuff. And I think no matter how much teacher leadership you do and step outside your role, it still comes down to this. Am I doing what I really believe is best for kids? Am I getting better every year? This is Shanna. She's the National Teacher of the Year. She's from Texas. We won't hold it against her. She's a wonderful person. And she gave a talk that I really liked because she gave teachers a really practical thing to do. And she does this every day. She said she takes 10 minutes every day and writes down, what do I do well? What do I need to work on? And what do I want to do with my students? And just to kind of clarify it, 10 minutes every day. And she thinks that writing itself is really important. So I'm going to ask you to do it. You can do it on your phone. You can do it with a piece of scrap paper on your laptop. But take about 1 minute and just write this down for you as a teacher or as a teacher leader. Just a couple thoughts on these 3 questions. We'll take a minute. And when you're done, if you see your partner's done, you can go ahead and share it with them if you want. Okay? Take 1 minute. Go. Thank you for doing that. I heard somebody say this line that I heard this summer from a great teacher. The big question is, would you want to be a child in your class? If you're a parent, would you want your child in your class? Yes. At the same time, I think we can forget that number 1. What do you do well is an important thing. You can hear what I talk about, right? I'm hard on myself. Most of us are hard on ourselves. I don't think we can forget what we do well and how to build on that. And what makes me feel better if I'm down to think back to that ghastly picture of 2000 and how bad I was at teaching when I started and how far I've come. I still try to get better every year, but I think we do a lot really well that we just take for granted at this point. It's just part of how we do school. Building relationships, getting real books in their hands. Those things matter. We've got to keep doing them. So I want to zoom out from this question and ask, what do teachers as a profession do well? What do we need to work on? And what does our profession want to become? For me, this is the journey. And someone said it really well in the survey. Our students need to know that their past doesn't necessarily predict their future. We need to have that courage that we ask our students to have. They overcome amazing obstacles in their lives. We need to do that too, right? And make sure that the problems in our profession are better for the next generation of teachers. This to me is the journey from teacher leadership. It's starting with, what kind of teacher do I want to be or need to be for my students? And what kind of profession do we want to build? And where do I fit into that, right? What am I good at? Not everyone has to do policy. Not everyone has to lead professional development. We can find what we're good at and contribute to building the profession. I'd ask us to think, what will our collective future story be? Not your story as one teacher, but what will our collective story be? And will we be a living message for future teachers that will leave this profession better for them and will solve some of the things that we know make it hard to do right by kids, even when we know what to do? So I wasn't going to talk about this originally in this, and then I got the survey. There were 9 different people that asked a version of this question. How can a teacher have more input into decisions made by policymakers? So here's my 2 cents on what I've learned. It goes back to this question. What do we do well as a profession? We build relationships. I've connected with people at this conference for 3 minutes who are just so open and excited and ask good questions in a way that you don't always get outside the teaching profession. We have to use that skill to build partnerships with policymakers. And what do we need to work on? I think we have a bad habit of just bringing whatever grievance is ruining our lives that month to a policymaker. And we've got to be a little more proactive. We've got to build a partnership with them. I had a chance to be in a room with Arnie Duncan, Secretary of Education, and there was a lot I wanted to say to him when I got my 5 minutes to talk to him. I wanted to tell him how testing was really ruining my students' lives, and this thing that was supposed to help poor kids was making their lives worse. I wanted to say that, but it would not have helped my students. What I said instead was, I'm part of this network of Teachers of the Year from all over K-12, all different states, and we would like to partner with you to help make policy work better for kids and families. And he said, all right, do you have a card? I said, yeah, here's my card. And he said, I'll give you a call. And I thought, there's no way Arnie Duncan is going to give me a call. 3 days later, my cell phone rings, and there's a message from him in his Chicago accent saying, hey, Justin, it's great talking with you. If you get a chance, give me a call back. If you get a chance. I can make contact. So I called him back. And that started this partnership that continues today, and it's gotten stronger every single year between this network of teachers that I'm part of and the staff of the department. Not just Arnie Duncan and all the staff. And I love this picture because it shows a teacher, my friend Marguerite, a 5th grade teacher in New York, sitting as equals with Arnie Duncan as partners. And to me, what a partner means is that it's a marriage, it's not a date. I think policymakers and teachers have plenty of dates that never go beyond that first date. We need an actual marriage, we need a way to keep coming together. And it means you're equals, right? And it means that you have a shared goal. And I just heard a teacher speak in Utah who worked wonders with this governor who didn't understand a lot about education by asking him one question. Tell me what you're trying to achieve. And he told her. And then she said, I can help you get there. I have a network of teachers who can help you get there. And that changed everything because he realized they had the same goal. I had this amazing opportunity last summer to meet with President Obama for 1 hour. And finally then, 5 years after I met Arnie Duncan, I got to say what I wanted to say 5 years earlier. And I told the president, the reason the teachers I know don't want to go to high poverty schools is not the kids. It's not because the kids are too hard or they don't want to work harder. It's because the current climate of testing has sapped all joy and meaning and delight out of those classrooms. And the teacher doesn't want to be in that. And I think what was important about that is first to frame it around kids. Not you're making my life hard, but you're not doing what you want to be doing for kids. And it had this huge impact. Arnie Duncan made this really surprising statement later. He finally started to follow this up in policy, but it wouldn't have happened if I'd started with that, right? We had to build a partnership where he knew that I was credible and we had the same goal and we would work together. So that's one thing. I think another thing is instead of raising issues, have an action plan. Don't come to a policymaker with a problem unless you have a solution, right? So don't come and tell them there's a problem with testing. It's not fair that our school got a D. We're a great school. Come and say, if you measure growth, you'd be able to do everything you want to do, but you'd be acknowledging the efforts of teachers in high poverty schools. You sometimes have kids who start 4 years below grade level and make a 1.5 years or 2 years of growth, but they're not there yet. And have some kind of policy.
Shout out.
So this is what you said a teacher leader is. Someone who shares knowledge with colleagues to improve the school as a whole. I talked earlier about a home library project that started with 25 kids. The next step was to have every teacher at my school get to do it. Every kid at my school, all 500 get to do it. Now it's 2,500. Takes risks to get better. I heard the National Teacher of the Year from 2010, Sarah Brown Wessling, say a great thing that really stuck in my head and will be in my head all year. I became more afraid of mediocrity than of making a mistake. And if you try to get to excellence, you try to get better, you're going to make some mistakes. You're going to take some risks that may flop. Celebrate your peers. I think this is critical. I think it's a solution to what a lot of us worry about, that if we become a teacher leader, we're trying to act like we're above our colleagues. That can make things tense. But it was really different when I got this award one year, where I got a bunch of money, and no one else in the school got anything, than when I was able to get this $100,000 grant because every single teacher got $1,500 to buy books for her class, right? It's a way of celebrating peers. Even just telling someone, hey, you should do national board certification. You're a great teacher. Do you need any help or advice? And then has a vision for the future. Creates a plan and works to implement it. This is what I would add to that list. I think teachers who are teacher leaders curriculum and policy, the best PD I've experienced was led by other teachers. I think that's why this conference is so great. The best policy I've seen was informed by teachers, so it actually worked. And the best curriculum I've seen was developed by teachers. Sometimes in partnership with other people, but teachers were the designers, not just the implementers. And then it has an impact beyond our own kids. That to me is huge. I love this picture because it's a kid I've never met. And I probably never will meet him, and I don't know his name. He goes to a different school across town. But when a teacher sent me this picture, I thought, now I've done something with this home library project. Because part of his smile was because of an idea I had. And now it's impacting kids who I don't even know, but their life is a little better and more fun because of this idea that I had. A lot of you, raise your hand if you know the starfish story. I think everybody knows the starfish story. It's a nice story. It captures something about teaching. But I think the reason that a lot of us are in this room is that we think the old man or old lady had a point when they said there are many miles of beach and thousands of starfish. And we do have to focus on that one we can help. But we also can't ignore the fact that there are hundreds or thousands of others that are struggling and failing. And for us, it's not enough anymore to save the one starfish. We want to save all the starfish. We want to build a system with colleagues that will save all the starfish. This quote from a professor I think rings true. There are many great classrooms. There are some great schools. There are a few great districts. They exist, but there are not as many. And for some reason, we have trouble as a profession taking excellence to scale. If I went to your classrooms, I would see moments of joy and compassion and excitement. I don't always feel that when I look at the larger system, when I look at education legislation, or what's coming out of the Department of Ed. Somehow we've got to infuse that sense of purpose and joy into these systems and make great districts and make great states, right? Not just great classrooms. I think we have to be honest about reasons not to be a teacher leader. One of you asked a simple question on the survey that I loved. When do we have the time? And to me, there are 3 reasons not to be a teacher leader that you have to think about. Not for your whole life, maybe, but where you are now. And one is, can I have a balanced life? Like, raise your hand if you're a parent. It is hard when you give all your energy and love to your students and you're exhausted at the end of the day, right? It's hard to have that balance. I think another reason is that thing we talked about, that sometimes it can feel like you're hurting your relationship with colleagues, and it seems like you're doing these things that they're not. Teaching is a really egalitarian profession. And our colleagues are what help us do this incredibly hard work. And then the third thing, I think the reason not to be a teacher leader, is that teaching is a lifelong craft. I hate it when people would say to me when I get these teaching awards, oh great, now you can be a principal. That doesn't make sense. That's not what I want to do. Teaching is not a step in a career ladder. It's a lifelong craft. And you can get better every single year. And I love everything I'm involved with in teacher leadership, but this year I dialed back. And it was because I felt like my first graders didn't get enough from me this year. And so I'm writing 1 blog post a month instead of 5 for Education Week. And I got off this committee I was on that does great work. Maybe I'll rejoin it, but I had to start with the classroom and make sure that I was doing right by these 25 kids before we zoomed out to all the other starters. So I think these are reasons not to be a teacher leader. Are there any reasons to be a teacher leader? To me, it has to do with this story. It's the last story about a student I want to tell you. Melissa came to my class as a 2nd grader, and she was reading on a kindergarten level, and she had 1 book in her home. And her mom was delayed mentally and also was not able to read in English or Spanish. So there was no one literate in the home. Melissa had been severely abused as a 1st grader. Basically, anything that can happen to you that's horrible had happened to this girl, and she didn't smile until about December. This is right when she started smiling. But you can see from her report card that she made 2 years of growth in 1 year. And I asked her, how are you doing this? I've never had a kid make this much growth where I read with you and you're better than you were a week ago. And she said, well, those books you gave me, now when my mom and my little sister and I are watching TV at night, they say, oh, Melissa, read to us. And so we turn off the TV, and I do. And I thought, here's the 7-year-old kid who is the one literate person in her family. That's courage. That's changing her family's evenings. So this was her in 3rd grade, and she was a little above grade level. This is 8th grade, where she came back this year and helped us do a book fair and bring up books for little girls who are right where she was back in 2nd grade, who had some of the obstacles in their lives that she had in hers. And she wants to be either a police officer or a nurse. And I'm pushing her to be a doctor. And she wants to go to college when she's done with high school. Her future story has changed. And she had a really dark future story, now it's different. But it's not done, right? She's going to need help finding a good college and finding financial aid. And just because her DRA level has reached where it's supposed to be, doesn't mean she's ready for college the way more affluent kids are unless she gets all kinds of support. And so I would love to tell you that her journey was because of me. But the reason I've chosen to be a teacher leader is that I no longer believe some of those things that look good on posters, that one teacher can make a difference alone. Right? Melissa succeeded not because of me, She succeeded because she also had a great teacher in 4th grade, in 5th grade, when she went to middle school. She had great principals, and she had a nurse who made sure her needs were met. She had a counselor who helped her deal with her abuse and who bought her pajamas when she didn't have pajamas for pajama day. She needed a system. I was not enough. She needed a system that would support her. So I'm going to ask you as kind of our final thing. You can do it on this today's meetup if you want, or you can just talk to a partner, either way. I want you to think, what do we need to do as a profession to make sure that it's not just that one kid who's lucky enough to have you as a teacher, but it's every kid, and that it's not for one year, it's from kindergarten all the way through high school and they go into college. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and talk in about 5 seconds. What do we have to do? What must we do as a profession? And then we have a few minutes for a couple thoughts or questions, so feel free to talk about that. Okay, go. One of my regrets about a lot of talks like this I've gotten to give is that I never get to hear enough from who's in the room. So I wanted to make sure that we had about 6 minutes to have some thoughts or questions. So feel free to just say something. You don't have to disguise a speech as a question, which I do sometimes. Feel free to just say what you think. Feel free to talk about what we must do or ask a question. Anita has the mic back there, so just raise your hand if you have a thought to share. What do we need to do as a profession in Arkansas, or a question?
I had a question about your picture with the president. When you said that to him, we got all excited. And yay, look what you said. What was his response, and what was the response of the other people in the room when you said that? Because I don't know that people are hearing that.
Yeah. One of the things was that all 4 of us had very similar stories. And that lunch was specifically people who had chosen to stay in high poverty schools. And I didn't know if anything would come of it. I wrote an article about this for Ed Week, and a lot of people said, that's really naive to think anything will change. Well, then a friend of mine who's at the Department of Ed said, whatever happened at that lunch had an impact here. I'm not saying it was just me. It was the whole conversation. She said, Arnie Duncan is suddenly saying really different things. He's in a really different message. And then later there was an Ed Week article that said it turned out this really surprising change in rhetoric had come from the White House and Obama saying, we need to fix this. This is a problem. What troubles me is it's late, right? He doesn't have a lot of time left as Secretary of Education. But I do think that that message is starting to get out, and I think in some ways it's almost more important at that local kind of school level. And I just think we've got to go to data because that's the language everyone speaks. If you look at how students are doing now in terms of being ready for college, they're less ready than they were before no child left home. So just because the gap is closing on standardized tests where you fill in bubbles doesn't mean kids are ready to live the lives they dream. And I just think we have to keep making that case. The other thing about that list that was interesting, though, is the only thing, and I feel like Obama was an amazing listener. I'm sure in his head, back of his head was like Syria and all this other stuff. He really listened intently. And then the one thing he referred back to half an hour later was the home library thing. And that's advice I've gotten talking to policymakers is say what you want to do. So a grievance, just a complaint is bad. A solution is better, but a solution with a really clear action plan is even better. And that was something that he could grab onto. Books for kids who don't have books. And I don't know if it was because of that, but later he did this huge ebook thing where all these ebook titles got released. And you never know, if you help put that idea into a policymaker's head, what will happen. But I agree with you. I mean, here we are 15 years later. This is a failed experiment. It's been 15 years. We gotta change it. Other thoughts, questions? Got somebody up front. Anybody?
Over here. Over here.
Oh, go ahead.
And I just, you finished it between us, and I'll just speak from the I, that's where I feel more comfortable. But I must check my ego at the door if we're gonna get anything done. And I think that we get into a my castle syndrome, where I'm just taking care of all of my little parts, and we're never really gonna grow until we check that.
That's a great point. And I used to really like that. People would say, I just close my door and do what's right for my kids. It's like, well, that's great for 25 kids, but what about the 25 across the hall? I understand that impulse when you have really bad policy, but I think you're exactly right. I mean, we have to share what we do. And for me, I still get nervous. I'm good friends with my principal. I've been there 10 years. I still get nervous when she walks in my room with a clipboard. That's how messy everything is. I notice that like these 3 kids aren't really doing what I asked them to do. But yeah, I mean, I'm trying as much as I can to focus on how can I be a better teacher for these kids. And I think it happens with our colleagues too. I had a colleague who was much better than me at phonics, but she never had real books in their hands during guided reading. And I couldn't just say to her, hey, you need to give kids books. So I asked if I could observe her and how she teaches phonics. And it created this kind of reciprocity where later she asked what I did to have these certain results. And I explained about how important real books were. And she was like, well, maybe I need to do that, But But it started with me being vulnerable and saying, look, I'm not good at phonics. I've always taught second, third grade, first grade, so
I think that we also have to make sure that we keep the value of what we do. And because I've caught myself saying things like, oh, if somebody asks what I do, I'm just a teacher. I'm not just a teacher. I'm a great teacher. I love my job. So when somebody says, what do you do? Oh, I'm a great teacher at this wonderful school. And making sure that we have just as much value within what we do as what everybody else's profession is. If we have value for what we do, everybody else will too. Because sometimes I think people look at teaching as something that's easy. And it's not. You know, we work really, really hard at what we do. And making sure that policymakers know that also, so that when they want to change licensure, or when they want to put things into effect, we can say, you know, we can talk to them and say, that really is not a good idea, because you need to be trained. We go to school to do our job. Just like doctors and lawyers do, you have to be highly trained to do what we do. And so making sure that we value ourselves and promote our profession just as much as everybody else does.
Yeah, I think we're bad about talking about the negatives. And there are negatives. For me, that's sort of like insight. That's like after the kids have gone to bed at night, and my wife and I then talk about the problems, not in front of the kids. When you're in front, you're always an ambassador, right? Anywhere. You go to a football game, you know, anywhere. You're an ambassador for the teaching profession. And I don't think we need to shy away from that anger we feel. I mean, I think you need to channel anger, you know, into constructive action. There are reasons to be angry as a teacher. But when it comes out as negativity, I do think we drive away people from the profession. You know, when we talk about how much we love teaching, it pulls them in.
And we said that we must care. That was kind of our collaboration, but we said, and if you don't, get out.
Yeah.
So, because we have some that they're there for the paycheck, and the kids dread going to their classes, and they beg to stay in yours, and they hide in the hallways. And so if you don't care, find another job.
Twitter's been big this couple of days, and we have to tell our story, and we have to tell it in a positive way, and we have to talk about how much we love what we do and how great our kids are. If we don't tell our community, then a different story is told, and it's all the negativity.
Yeah.
Channel the anger in the proper way, but don't use social media to strike back at your school. That's only going to hurt you in the long run. So use it to talk up your school, and how great your kids are, and how great your colleagues are.
Yeah, again, what we do well is build relationships. And I asked this guy for advice when I was going to talk to senators. I said, how do I make the case that relationship matters? This social affective part really matters. It's not just fluffy stuff. He said, you know what you do? Ask that senator to tell you about his favorite teacher. And when he's done, say, you just talked about your relationship, not your AYP that year as a school, you know, not your maps quote. You talked about your relationship with that teacher. That's what matters, you know. And again, with the meeting with Obama, like, it wasn't negative, you know. It's like I just told this story of the kid Cesar who got $10 in a writing contest, and then you asked him what he was going to do with the money, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to give it to my mom to help her buy some food for her family." And just talking and making the case that it's not the kids that are the problem in high poverty schools, right? It's the system, but there are these brave kids there. We have about 1 minute left, so I want to just give a final thought. When I became a dad, I feel like my job as a teacher really got simplified because I realized all I wanted for these two kids, who I love more than anyone else on earth, is for them to be happy and for them to be good. And everything else is a means to that end, right? We want kids to be happy, we want them to be good people. We've got to keep making the case, and sometimes even to ourselves, that school is not about this. It's about them. You know, it's about Anna and Salvador and Will and Melissa and our own sons and daughters and all those kids that you carry in your heart that can make the frustration worth it. We're the reason that in July, when you could be doing anything, you're here trying to become a better teacher and a better teacher. And thank you all for doing that. I appreciate it. And there was a purpose to this that will kind of guide this paper here, kind of the leadership plan for this year. So for me, I thought about that thing that was important to me, getting real books into kids' hands. And I had this question in my head. What impact would it have to have every child in my class build a home library? So the kids I teach, it's about 97% poverty in our school. And I realized that my daughter, who was 2 years old, had about 200 books on her shelf. My students, who were 6 and 7 years old, had 3 books on their shelves, or 7. It was in the single digits. And I wondered, you know, what impact would that have? So we started this project I called the 1,000 Books Project, because every second grader in the whole class got 20 books in second grade. And then the next year, they got 20 more books. So it ended up with 1,000 books going to their hands and homes. They didn't have to bring these back. And some of these we do during guided readings, like the Rough Face Girl. These girls loved that. We read it, we did all the comprehension stuff, and they got to keep the book, add it to their home library. Some of them they chose. So TJ here went through the Scholastic website and made a wish list of 5 books, and I bought those 3 for them. What I saw that really surprised me was not just really accelerated reading development, but an impact on family literacy. So this is Anna. She has 4 little sisters, 5 girls in the family. And she told me one day, you know, Mr. Minkel, I was reading the BFG to Esmeralda. Esmeralda's 4. And she said, Yesenia, who's 2, was laughing and laughing at the part about whiz poppers. So I think she understood it too. And a lot of my students had parents who were literate in Spanish. They could read to them in Spanish. But these little kids in the home didn't have anyone reading to them in English. And a lot of times they didn't have very many books in Spanish either. So now when we get Anna's little sisters, they are also excited about reading. They understand how books work from a really young age. The other thing I saw that is probably the most important to me was just excitement about reading. So they made up the fantastic Mr. Fox game at Indoor Recess one day. And this is Joanna, and she's one of those kids who seems like she's ready to be senator. Like not when she's a grown-up, but just now. And so they would all line up at Indoor Recess, and Joanna would say, you're the mean farmer. You're the baby fox. And I was like, what are you guys doing? She said, oh, it's the fantastic Mr. Fox game. We made it up from that read aloud we're doing. And then they'd ask questions like, can we take the poetry books to recess? So I saw this excitement about books. What I want you to do is just write down in a minute, the very top of that sheet, what is something that you plan to do this year? And maybe think back to what you're good at, what's your strength, and what is something that you could do to share that with one colleague or a grade level or department, maybe every teacher in your school. It could be professional development. It could also be something that you just want to work on individually with your teaching. And this was mine at the start of the year after this project. I plan to provide every child in our school with a home library. So go from my classroom, 25 kids, to 500 kids in the school. I want you to write why. For me, it was because of those 3 things. It accelerated reading development, it really fostered family literacy, like those little sisters, and it built a love of books. And then finally, why is this good for kids? Because when it's time to explain this to funders or to administrators, and you need people to do stuff to help you, not just say, oh, that's great, go do it, but actually help you, you've got to be able to make that case, really in one sentence, like we talked about with the elevator speech. So to me, it's that our students need books at home to become strong readers, inquisitive thinkers, and thoughtful people. Just having books in school is not enough. So we're going to take about maybe a minute and a half to do this, just on that blue paper or green paper, just write down what do you plan to do and why. Why is it good for you? If you need a little more time to finish, go ahead, but I'm going to start just kind of walking through how I did my plan and really scaled this up from these 25 kids to eventually 2,500 kids this year who are getting home libraries. So it started with just that classroom impact and seeing this was a good thing that kids needed that I hadn't realized before. But I really like this line, a child is a candle to be lit, not a cup to be filled. And I think that's the same thing with teachers, that when you ignite a teacher's excitement or ideas, it's really different from a training where you're kind of filling information in their heads. But I wanted to scale it up. And so the next year we had a grade level. So it was 3rd grade teachers did this. And then the next year, there were 13 teachers at our school. And by now, my principal had seen the value in it, and she allocated $5,000 of Title I money. So before it had been basically out of pocket and Scholastic helping out. Now there was some money behind it. But we wanted to make it even bigger. So this partner teacher and I did this grant. We only got about 75 applicants in the whole country, which is not very many, for this $100,000 grant. We were narrowed down to one of 15. We had to get everyone to vote for us, and then we got this $100,000 grant. So suddenly, this year, it's every child in my school, but it's also all the kids in another elementary school. It's also high poverty, and it's 2 grade levels at a 3rd school. Then the university heard about it, University of Arkansas, and they're funding 2 additional schools in Springdale. And then there's some kind of rural schools, they're doing it more as like a pilot with a few different grades. So what happens now is I see these books arrive, and they're not just for my class anymore. These big books come, and it's because a teacher has ordered it. Every single teacher in the school got $1,500 that year to order books for their class. They got another $1,500 this year through December. And we're working this summer on funding to continue. We also started a book fair, so that became, just to be a little bit less cumbersome with teachers having to order 4 times a year. They only order books 2 times a year, and then the kids have this book fair. And the very first day, this little guy in glasses, it was just kind of moping around like this, and he wasn't looking at books. And I said, Jasper, what's wrong? He said, I don't have $1. I said, Jasper, you don't need $1 today. These are free. Like every kid gets 5 books for free. My principal really scaled up this idea of family literacy. And so we started family literacy nights, where I'd model how to read with your child and ask them about books. And I'd tell them, look, like, if you only speak Spanish, that's not a problem. Asking your child questions in Spanish about a book they read will still help their thinking. And so we do this, we kind of acted it out with a class. We had an amazing turnout, and basically it was partly because they cared about literacy, partly because we fed them pizza for every single kid and every family. And then also we had an additional 4 books that the parents helped pick out with the kids. And we had a lot of titles in Spanish or bilingual. And you can see here what I love about this picture. There's like 2/3 dads, who are not always the ones that come to the parent-teacher conferences, but for some reason they came out for this. This mom came up and she just was thanking my assistant principal and said, I know that she needs to have books at home. I know that's important, but we don't have any money left after rent and groceries to buy her books. And she just kept thanking this principal for her part of making sure that her daughter had books. So now, these kids are excited. They're getting these books at home, and it's not just, my class. It's a school-wide project. It's a district-wide initiative. And long-term, I'd like to make sure every kid in America who wants a home library can have them. And some kids don't need that support. My daughter doesn't need to get them through school. She gets books sent by her grandma. But a lot of families can't afford the books. And even if they know it's important, they don't have the money. So the big thing to me is that this is why teacher leadership is important and why it doesn't only need to be policy. That's one piece. This is something that started with 25 very happy kids, made their lives better. Now it's 2,500 happy kids. It's scaled up. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is think about your network. And this is what really helped me, is kind of mapping out who you know. And I think it's bigger than you realize. Like, I know we're going to run out of time and you'll still be thinking of new things. I did this at home before I asked you to do it, and this is kind of what I thought about. I started with my school, was the first bubble I did, and thought about who is already involved in a really key way. I give a little check mark, like my principal, the librarian, especially when we did the book fairs. I thought about my town, like people I don't always interact with, the Chamber of Commerce. There's this literacy council in Fayetteville. And I thought about district leadership and how to pull them in now that my principal is on board. And then I always think kind of that Latin phrase, qui bono, who benefits? Scholastic Books not only cares about kids, they make money from this, and so they're a natural partner. There's a woman flying here at the end of August from Scholastic in charge of 22 states who's going to help me meet with funders and foundations and our district leadership, partly because she cares about kids, but partly because this will make a lot of money for Scholastic. So I'm going to ask you to just take a few seconds and you're going to kind of block out your network, and then go ahead and start thinking through first step, next step, third step. How would you make this happen? So for me, the first part was collecting data, and that didn't just mean DRA and MAP scores, right? Even though that was part of it. We sent home surveys that would ask, how many books does your child have at home? How much do they like reading? Scale of 1 to 5. 1 is hates it, 5 is loves it. And we saw this movement of kids being excited about reading. We needed the funding. That was kind of the next phase. And the final part was to meet with teachers and principals about scaling it up. We chose these other 2 schools very intentionally. They had a lot of high-poverty kids, but the principals are great leaders, and they were excited to work with us. So we'll take about 3 minutes for this part. Just kind of block out your network and think through those steps. All right, we're going to stop for now. You can keep working on it later. This is the part where it's about to get messy, but it's also the part where I think we'll learn a lot. And so what I'm going to ask you to do in just a minute is you got a playing card on your desk. And when I say go, you're going to go find your people. So what that means is the kings find the kings, tens find the tens, aces find the aces. You should all be together. And then if you have a club or a spade card, you two will talk to kind of share your plan, talk through it, ask each other questions. If you have a dime or a heart, you'll share. We don't have the full 52 people here, so if you end up without a partner, just come up to the front, and then I will find you a partner. So please stand up and go find your people. You should be a group of 4, at least 3. So a lot of what I have to do is pitch this idea to people. It started with my principal. In August, we're meeting with the school board president and also the superintendent, and also this woman from Scholastic. We have some separate meetings with foundations. One of the things I think you have to think through is first being able to say really smoothly, in just a sentence, what you want to do and why, and how it will help kids. But you also have to think about the audience, right? So if you look up here, you're going to have 2 or 3 or 4 different roles. One person will just be themselves. They're pitching the story, the idea. But the others all take on a role. So if you have a club, you're going to be a principal. So just kind of say out loud, what are some things principals are going to really care about? That might be different from what you care about as a teacher. What do they care about?
Who's going to work with the schedule?
Scheduling, logistics, money, budget, yeah, money, test scores. Yeah, something that I don't think about as much as a teacher that I think principals think about more is how do I make it systematic? Like I tend to think if I'm doing a great job for my kids, great. They tend to think, how can I make something happen in every classroom in the school? How about diamonds or superintendent? How would that be different? What do superintendents care about that's different from teachers or principals?
How much is this gonna cost?
Budget? Yeah. What else?
Community.
Yeah. What does the school board think? They have a much larger constituency, right? Like my constituency is 25 families in a lot of ways. Theirs are thousands of families, school board people, business interests, the media. Everybody hates bad press. They'd rather have no press than bad press. But they like good press, right? So this is something to think about. When I started pitching this idea, I'd say this is great for kids. It makes them happy, and it helps their reading development. And that's great, but sometimes you need even more than that. So then I started thinking about, well, Richard Ellington has this research that giving kids a home library of 10 books at a cost of $5 a book is equivalent to 2 sessions of summer school. That's how much it helps them, without a reading log or anything else. You know how much 2 sessions of summer school costs? $3,000. You know how much this home library costs? And that's $3,000 per kid. A home library is $50 per kid. So you can make that economic benefit. It's not actually more money, it's reinvesting or reallocating, right? How about a parent who happens to be the president of the PTO? And that's what this page will be. What do parents care about?
Their own
Kids, children. Yeah, they actually, I think, care less about test scores. It's more about, is my kid happy? Is my kid going to be ready for college or for whatever career they want? Yeah, maybe when you're talking to the superintendent, you say students. When you talk to parents, you usually say children, right? That resonates more with them. It's their children. How about a local business owner? Arts. What do they care about?
advertisement.
Advertisements.
Are they going to get help?
Good press.
What are they going to get out of it? PR.
Yeah, PR. And they also care about kids, but one thing you got to think about is if you rattle off DRA, MAP, they usually have no idea what you're talking about unless they have a kid in school. So trying to break it down to common language, right? So what we're going to do is kind of watch the simulation. Don't be nervous. It's okay if you feel nervous. And Jessica, I'm going to have you be the teacher. You're just yourself. You're pitching your idea.
All
Okay? And then what's your name, Nikki?
Yes.
Okay, you're going to be the principal of the school. Maggie, you're going to be a parent, and then you are going to be a local business owner. Okay? So basically what you're going to do in this simulation is Jessica will just read off the top of our pages, kind of say, here's what I want to do and why, and then you three are going to ask questions. And it's okay to kind of ham it up, you know, but you're going to pretend you're really that person. You can ask hard questions. You don't have to be mean, but ask kind of probing questions, okay? Go.
Okay. I plan to build a parent-partner culture with our Tier 1 students because we need help and we want all of our students to succeed.
So how do you plan on getting the parents involved to be able to help them?
By having, am I answering questions or am I waiting all the way?
Yep.
Okay. By having parent nights at first or maybe even parent breakfast to have them to just come to our school and build a relationship and be on campus before we start working on the work.
Have you researched this in other schools, or have you had a desire or know a connection outside of this to where you've been able to be exposed to this, to see this somewhere else, to know that this was successful?
I have found research that says it's successful.
So what, as a parent, you know, I think this is a great idea, but what is going to be required of us? Because, you know, as a president of PTO, we've got parents who want to be involved, but, you know, can't necessarily come to a breakfast or do certain things, and they're going to feel bad about that. So we want to make sure everybody's involved, you know what I mean?
Well, we'll definitely offer like several different ways to get you on campus, and we can offer home visits as well.
As a local cafe owner, I can see how we could possibly partner. Can you tell me about how many people you imagine meeting?
We want to start with a focus on 10 students per grade level, so about 30 families.
So when you talking breakfast, are you thinking like donuts?
We could do
coffee?
breakfast, or we could even do pizza nights.
Okay. How long do you imagine this to last?
As in each session, or
And
like
how
a year?
often? Yeah.
Okay, so our goal would be once a month, and maybe 30 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
All right, great. I'm going to cut it there. So one of the things I think this helps you do is think through some things you might not have thought about. Think about your audience. I think it really helps when you get to that actual moment of pitching this to kind of have thought through from a different perspective. Like we tell our kids with writing, don't just think about what you want to write, think about how the reader, the listener will interpret it. So again, these are your roles. It doesn't matter who goes first. We each take a turn, go around. I'm not going to say when to switch, so just make sure each person gets one question, then we'll rotate. And I'll call time. Thank you all for doing that. When I walked around, I heard some really funny, probing, hard questions, but I also heard really eloquent, kind of impassioned explanations. They were very clear and really practical. Good work. So I wanted to leave a few minutes at the end for just questions or thoughts. So what is a question you have, or what's kind of some aha you had while you were in the simulation? Just raise your hand. We've got a mic to run around. Any thoughts or questions? Go ahead. Sure.
Okay. I think just thinking about the language that you would use with each person and making sure that you were relating to them on their level instead of just sticking to your like teacher voice. Because if you can pitch it the way they want to hear it, you're much more likely to get what you want.
That's a great point. And I think one thing I actually tend to have, I think, overly negative stereotypes sometimes about, say, legislators. And I meet with them, they're great. They care about kids. They just are confused about really important things that can help them not be confused. Yeah. And so I was meeting with these legislators from like 30 different states. And at the end, I said, you are not America's image of politicians. Everyone hates politicians. All of you are thoughtful. You care about kids. And they started laughing and they were happy, but they also said, well, you're not our stereotype of teachers either. People think teachers are money grubbing or like absurd stereotypes about union goons or whatever, and they found out they were these teachers, including a lot of them in unions who were really thoughtful and who cared about kids. It's a great point. A couple more?
One thing that came up in ours,
One thing that came up in ours and probably in others is funding. Like this, a lot of these ideas that we have need funding. Do you have like specific guidance on getting grants? And one thought is we need a little workshop on getting grants.
Right. Yes, that's always what amazes me is how many people want to give away money. But I feel like it's just accessing it. Go ahead, Jessica.
The grant that we wrote for this was the first grant that I ever wrote. I don't know if it relates to other grants. I'm sure other grants might be more difficult, but I took their language and gave it back to them.
right, yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah.
And that, I feel like they want people that are willing to listen and see their vision and make it your own, but making sure that you're spending the money the way that they hope.
Yeah, and like Farmers has these $2,500 grants. The annoying part is you have to get all your friends to email, but it's like a mini version of that $100,000 one we got. But again, it's amazing how much money is just sitting out there. Like this one is $100,000. It only had 70 applicants, and it was because it took a long time. It was like 20 pages, but it was worth it. It was worth the work. Donors Choose is good. And I would also just think, again, like with Scholastic, they're not a philanthropy, but I approached them right away when I had this idea. And right away, this one was like, well, yeah, we'll give you half the books. You can go up with the other half. And now, they're invested in it. Now they're going to come down and fly here and try to help us find donors. Just think about those partners. You might not know where to go, but these partners know, like in your network.
How did you start? What was your starting point?
Scholastic books, and just contacting them, telling them my idea, and right away this woman said, I'll give you half the books. The other half, like my dad has a company, he donated money. Some of it was out of pocket, some of it was points, some of it was, that $200 we get that lasts like a week for buying supplies. We have time for one more question or thought, if anybody has one. Okay, so here are my last 2 minutes. I like this line by this Arkansan here, where he said, there is nothing wrong with America that can't be cured by what is right with America. And that's what I think about education, that too often we look outside for outside solutions. It's here, it's in your classrooms, it's in your ideas already. I don't like this word anymore, reform. I used to not mind it, now I hate it, like with accountability, because it's come to mean I will come from outside and fix you and tell you what to do. I taught for 7 months before I left or whatever. A lot of times it's outsiders. I do like this word transform. I think we get stuck in this dichotomy. Either teachers are great and everything's fine, or we need to throw out everything and do what corporations do. I think there's this other path, which is transformation. And we need to change things, but we can do it from within together. And again, I think we're in a weird position as teachers because we are the ones that do the work, right? There's power in this, that we are the ones actually involved teaching students. So we're shaping their days and their dreams. That's a powerful thing. We're in the profession that makes all other professions possible. Teachers, there are no engineers, there are no doctors, there are no plumbers, there are no more teachers. We are where it starts. And to me, this quote kind of sums it up. Think about your little paper, and your idea that maybe you've already started or maybe you'll start this year. This is by Thoreau. If you have built castles in the sky, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now, put the foundations under them. Thank you all so much. Feel free to find me on email or Twitter. It was great.